Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. And I'm very privileged and honored today to have Dan McCabe with me. Dan and I did a project 2 decades ago, which I think we both would agree was one of the most significant experiences that we have ever had in any work that we've done. And I still draw upon it, and you hear me talk about it, but we are going to hear about it even more so in maybe in more detail than you've ever heard today. So, welcome, Dan, and tell
Well,
us a
thank
little
you.
about who you are and what you've done and what you're doing
Yeah,
now and
great.
whatever else is great for us.
Well, right now I am a happy retired grandfather of seven, and in a week, eight grandkids. And that, I have traded all the titles that I've had over my career. My favorite title is Papa. So I am very happy to be
Oh, that's
in the
great.
role that I am. But over the course of my career, I've had a blessed career, having spent time with initially AT&T, who acquired NCR, the National Cash Register Company in Dayton, Ohio. That's what brought me to Dayton from the East Coast, where I spent my growing up years and my early years with AT&T. But uh, while at NCR, I was called to a company, Dayton Power and Light, DP&L, or the corporate company DPL, to serve as the head of HR for them. And then upon leaving there after they were acquired by a global energy company, I spent the last 10 years of my career with a very fast growing health insurance company called CareSource out of Dayton, Ohio, but it is a national company and they serve the market of Medicaid, Medicare marketplace, very focused on the um, the lower income clientele and really helping to lift those people up. So most of my career was early part in HR, but I always did HR as I moved into the chief administrative officer roles that I had both at DP&L and at CareSource. And it's from the HR perspective that you and I had really got the opportunity to work together.
If I remember correctly, the day that we started our project was your first day on the job at DPL.
Pretty much, yes. It was probably day two. I think I knew where the coffee machine was, and that was about it.
Well, it was a great experience, and why don't you tell us why we did this project, and then I'll give you my take on what it
Okay,
looked like from my perspective.
right. Well, what attracted me to the role when I was being recruited, I was with NCR. I had been there for 13 years, and I was happy in my career there. But they had a new CEO that had just started about 6 or 9 months prior, and I realized that where he was taking the company and his set of values were not consistent with what I wanted, and so it kind of piqued my interest around other opportunities. So although I didn't go chasing opportunities, I got a call from a recruiter who was representing Dayton Power and Light, which is a utility company, electric utility company based out of Dayton, Ohio. It serves about 500,000 customers throughout South West Ohio. And they had at the time five different coal plants that were generating most of the electricity that served the customers of DP&L. They had just hired about 6 months prior a new CEO who was brought in to really help change the culture of the company. And by change, I mean to bring it back to what it was. And here's the reason why he was brought in to do that role. And subsequently, he really wanted a strong HR partner that could help him in that endeavor. The so DP&L is a very local company. Utility companies are very invested in the community, and for I mean, 100 years, I think Dayton Power and Light have been around. For the 5 years prior to the new CEO joining, the executives, being the chairman of the company, the president, and the CFO, wanted to take the company in new directions to try to keep the utility because utility was a cash cow and to take those earnings and to be able to funnel it into like private equity type of opportunities. And so they were investing in a number of different projects and investment in South America. They bought a corporate jet. They were flying in and out of South America. And what really caught them up was that they started tying their compensation to the private investment opportunities without fully acknowledging that to the board and to the compensation committee of the board. And so the employees, now think of any type of utility company is made up of probably 80% union employees. And these are, men and women that, climbing poles, fixing wires, working in the coal plants, tightening pipes and, what very manual, hard work. And there they started to see the top echelon of the company treating the company like a piggy bank and then creating opportunities that they couldn't even imagine. I mean, it was so far from what their understanding of business and what they knew DP&L to be was. And so over that 5 year period of time, trust was starting to break down. And there was a clear division between the workers and the upper echelon of the company. And when the board found that they were tying compensation to things that were not fully disclosed, the three top people were fired. They had an interim leader that came in and just tried to kind of straighten it out a bit, but there was a lot of damage that had been done, and they really need to bring a CEO in that could really help to get the culture back to what it was. So it's not trying to redefine the culture. It was just trying to get the culture back to what it was. And the most important aspect of that was not necessarily the culture, because it was always there, maybe a bit dormant. It was the trust that was broken between the employees
Yeah.
and the executives. And so that's where I remember our chairman at the time spoke to one of your colleagues about this opportunity that we could try to create a set of values that could get the employees rallied around where the company was going. And that individual said Ed Brenniger would be the perfect person to help initiate that project. And that's where you and I came to be.
Well, I will say that it is the best project that I've ever had in every sense of the word. Um, that first day I walk in, I'm in a coat and tie,
Mhm.
and um, I walk into the room. You got your 9 people there. I mean, this is laying the kind of the context of what was going to happen. And Kelly, the union president, looks at me. He says, "If you don't take that tie off, I'm going to come over here and cut it off."
Spoken
And
as only Callie could say it.
and I said, "Okay, it's fine with me." I took my tie off, took my suit coat off, and we went at it. And my first question to them was, how far back in time do we have to go to when this was a happy company?
Mhm, mhm.
And he said 20 years.
Wow.
And I said, what was it like then? He says, we were a family.
Yeah.
And I said, what does that look like? He says, we all knew each other. We knew each other's families. We did things together. And I said, so what happened? Well, these jokers
Yeah.
changed all that. And the way he described it, the reasons why they were fired is different than what he said. They stopped allowing us to make decisions. They
Right.
wanted to be very top down, and that's where the trust was lost. And so we
Yeah, in
began to.
fact, the headquarters, a beautiful building,
Mhm.
union people were not allowed in that building.
Oh, I didn't
And
know that.
yeah, up until Paul Barbus took the position as a new CEO, the union was persona non grata. And so, that just reinforced to them that, there was a two-class system that was, developing or had developed.
Well, I think it's worth our audience understanding what Paul did.
Hmm.
And Paul had been there 4 months when I showed up and you showed up.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he had said nothing about what his plans were. All he did was go around and build relationships. And
Right.
what struck me as so brilliant was he would go out to where the line operations were and he would take the breakfast to these guys. And
Hmm.
he'd be showing up at like 5:30 or 6 with breakfast, and he'd be in t-shirt and jeans. And they weren't talking about work. They were talking about their lives. They were talking about their families and things like that.
Right.
And they go off to do work. He went home, put his suit on, he'd go back, he'd go to work. And and that to me was a signal of what real leadership is, because
Hmm.
what he is saying to them is we're together in this and we're going to be working side by side, and your trust is important
Right.
because I'm going to trust you.
Right. Right. Yeah, Paul was the very unassuming. You'd meet him, walking down the street, talk to him, and you never say, "Wow, he must be this top CEO of a big
No.
company." He wasn't like that. He was just a regular guy that had a true heart for people and really brilliant person. I mean, what he did, and we could get into a little bit about the outcome of what happened after we kind of got the ship straightened and it set a sail. But he brought just a very humble personality, um, and a very engaging personality to the company.
Well, it may be work, what he hired me to do was help write a value statement, and this took place over 3 months. And it's worth telling this story because I think it was it was a moment of transition
Hmm.
that was a restoration of the past as something alive in the future. So there was all this reticence about writing this
Hmm.
value statement, if you recall, and
Yes.
we
Well, they
had our
didn't believe.
last.
Yeah, they had a lot of poo-pooing. Like they just didn't believe that we were being genuine.
That's right.
And
And nor should they have felt that. I mean, I totally, accept that. And I said, so we were down to our last 2 days, if you
hmm.
recall, and we didn't have a
Hmm.
value statement. We were after giving Paul something the next day. And
Right.
so I sent everybody home and said, anybody wants to write a statement tonight, bring it back tomorrow and we'll look at it, and two people, I don't remember who, but two people brought statements back.
Right.
And we looked at them. I said, so, okay, now you see what we have. Why don't we take a few minutes, and if anybody else wants to write something, well, let's do that. So we ended up with five statements,
I remember that. Yes.
and I gave them all 5 votes, and they could allocate their votes however they wanted. And one of those statements that had been written overnight um, won the day,
Hmm.
and it was a very good statement. And I said, so this was the moment of truth. Says, are you ready to present this to Paul?
Hmm.
And they said yes. And so we hid the votes, and you went down and brought Paul down back to the room. And
Hmm.
we said, Paul, these are the 5 statements. Which one do you like? And he chose the one that they did.
Oh,
And
yeah.
you could feel the emotion go through the
Yeah.
room.
Yeah. That was just a reinforcement that, this was a genuine leader that.
The way I would care, I've told this story so many times because to me, it is emblematic of what a leader can do
Mhm.
when he decides or she decides that she wants the people to trust him or her. And
Mhm.
so when that happened, the feeling that went through the room was, we're going to be okay. We're
Right.
going to be all right.
Right.
And then
Yeah,
what you
because
all did with that was really remarkable.
there'd be, many leaders that would go in there and say, well, I don't really like that. This is what I would like it to say. They would want to add their emphasis on, whatever was
Right.
important to them. But, Paul, he was smart enough and genuine enough to know that this needed to be a bottoms up type of value statement. And to just add a little color to the team that was brought together, it was from across the company. It was, I think I was probably the only executive there,
Uh-huh.
but there were people
You
there
were.
from the union, there were people there from the plants, there were people from accounting. I mean, it was a very representative group, and it, we did a lot of storming and forming as we, went through the process. But it was one of those kind of eureka moments that, as you said, go home, come back if you can give me some value statements that we can react to, that would be great. And I remember two people, I don't recall who they were, but I can almost envision that moment where and that was like the catalyst, because once we saw those statements, then we were able to work off of those to get eventually to the one that we presented.
And I think it's important to understand, as it's just as important to understand what you all did with that statement,
Mhm.
because you used that as a tool for developing a program that transformed the company.
Yes, yes, and we put a lot of emphasis, in the whole rollout of the value statement. It was not just, okay, we're going to print up some posters and everyone's going to put it in the conference room. This was going to be a very people to people type of rollout, where we brought groups together to discuss the values so that people could understand what was the intent and to get some feedback as well. And I remember the whole tagline around that was, "We are DPNL.
Yeah.
We are DPNL," and that was important. It's just not a catchphrase. Well, we're DPNL. The "we" was so important given the prior administration and how people felt um, disengaged and just not valued. And so that was an important part of the rollout.
So the so you had a lot of confirmation from your
Mhm.
people, but
Yes.
then you had confirmation from the world a couple of years later. And what happened there?
Well, it was amazing that not that we were rated by Forbes as the top performing utility company in the country, and not, I mean, and we're a mid-market size, but we're about $1 billion revenue, and we are. They were looking at, the Dukes of the world and other, huge Southern company, you know, um, utilities, and there's this kind of little bitty DPNL that, on all the metrics that were needed to measure efficiency and productivity and capability, we were number one. And I think to the employees and to the executives, that was just confirmation that we were back. Because this company had always been a well-run utility, it just lost its way, and we found the way back.
Is that the was that recognition also when you were designated as one of the 100 most trustworthy companies? Is that the
Yes,
same thing?
yes, yes,
That's the
yes,
same book.
yes. Thank you. So that was a combination of both trustworthy and I mean, the trustworthy part was like, who would have who would have thought, 2 years prior,
Yeah.
that that's what we would be recognized for.
So the lesson, I mean, this is the lesson I take away from that is I don't care what you think your situation is. You can turn this around in 2 years if you decide to do it. That's the message that I have said to people so many times. No, they don't necessarily believe that because their own doubts about their own leadership capacity is a huge determining factor in a lot of change processes in organizations. But
Yeah,
you
and
all
quite
proved
honestly,
it. It could
yeah,
work.
and it wasn't rocket science what we did. No, no, what we did, it was all intentional. I mean, the important part is that you're going in with intent, and the intent is, the intent that we had was to reinvigorate our employees, to regain their trust, and to really go back to the roots that made the company as great as it was for so many years. But the process that we used for that was fairly straightforward, but it was a collective effort, and it wasn't the executives coming together. And I've been part of these processes where the executives come together and they write their vision statement, they write the values, and then they expect the employees to get in line and just accept them.
They'd
This
sell it
was,
to the employees,
yeah,
and
yeah.
they're not
This
buying.
this was as much a bottoms up process as could be. And then, the people who were part of the core team that developed those values, they owned them, and they took ownership of it as we rolled it out to the rest of the company. So I think that that aspect of it was also equally important. That this was really a representative across the company effort, not just the executives driving something.
And I think it was validation that the historic character of DP&L was one of trust, and that
Yes,
that period of time where there wasn't any was it was just a blip, a kind of a hiccup in
it
the
was.
time.
Yeah, think of a utility company. I mean, employees have to have believe in the trust of what they're doing. They're climbing poles, in storms. We've got below freezing weather here in Ohio today, and I'm sure there are, lines that have come down, and these employees are climbing poles in frigid weather to reconnect because they know that if their grandmother was sitting in their house without electricity, they would want to make sure that they got the electricity back up and running. But all that is predicated on feeling like you're trusted to do your work and that you're recognized and appreciated for that work. And that level of trust and appreciation and recognition, was lost. And as a result, and you could look at our financials, you could look at our operational metrics. When we were in the dark period, the financials were reflective of that. And as soon as we got back to who we were, and employees, appreciated the fact that the value statement was representing what they wanted this company to be, the operational metrics and the financial metrics, you know, all came back and then some. And as I said, not only were we recognized as a top utility, but Forbes recognized us as one of the top trustworthy companies to work at.
So if let's say that there are people watching or listening to us today that are running an operation, running an organization, and they're facing significant challenges.
Mhm.
We could talk about VUCA or whatever you want to talk about, but all those different ways of describing the chaos and the complexity of
Yeah.
operating a company today. What, from your perspective, over your course of your uh, history of service, what is it that you would recommend to them as a place to start if they wanted to kind of build a strength in a company that has been missing for whatever reason?
Well, I think first of all, executives can have a tendency to get isolated, and to be up into the ivory tower. And once you get into that mode, you've lost the connection with employees. Um, I've always lived by having many skip level meetings and trying to meet with employees 2 or 3, 4 levels down from me over the course of my career to not necessarily have an agenda, more importantly, to just get to know them and let them know you care, and to, from those discussions, occasionally understand where there are issues that, as a leader, you could help step in and help resolve. So to me, it's all about relationships and what you can, as an individual, as an executive, do to help, fortify relationships. But it's the relationships at the lowest levels that become most important, because if a first level person feels like you know them or they know you, and that you see them in the hallway and you know their name, or you could just say hello, that will make more difference to them than most anything that you could say to them, because they feel like you care. And to me, what Paul did as a CEO for DP&L that really made the difference was he genuinely cared about people.
Mhm.
And, you know, I'll never forget, we had um, an overnight with um, a group with, probably, I'm trying to think, 100 union employees. Paul and I and a few other leaders just went. We rented out a big hall. We played pool. We drank beer. We had music. There was no agenda there except for us trying to get to know them getting to know us, and most importantly, seeing that we were no different than they were. You know, that we're just there to, get to, to enjoy each other. And so that, to me, again, it's all about the relationship aspect of what you need to do at a company.
I totally agree with you. And what I see is that that's very difficult for many executives to take that step. And I'm wondering what you see there. What is it that where is that resistance? Where is that reticence to want to engage in developing relationships with people that
You
um,
know,
are
well, sometimes, as you get higher up in an organization, you could develop, I hate to say it, a sense of arrogance that, you're more important than they. And so it just, and you're too busy to find the time to spend, having to meet with, people 2 or 3 levels below you. So some of that is just, an executive arrogance that I think, is, what kills companies. Because once that permeates within a top level, then you've really lost the, the, the troops. I think the other, barrier to that is, sometimes you don't want to hear what's going on. It's easier to be, fat, dumb, and happy than to, hear from, frontline people what the issues are.
yeah.
But those are the real issues. I mean, if you're not addressing the issues at the front line, then you're just losing an opportunity to really make the company, from good to great. That's, to me, is one of the most important things in making a company from good to great, is to understand the issues at the lowest level and to try to resolve those issues. But that all comes through listening and then acting.
I've been doing leadership stuff in one way or another for 40 years, over 40 years, 40, this is 42 years. And you know what I saw at the very beginning of that process, I mean, we're talking mid 80s,
Hmm.
was that there was this sense that the title and the role granted someone a sense of imperial
Mhm.
protection from scrutiny and that sort of thing. And you would read biographies of CEOs, business CEOs, stuff like that, and they were setting these people up as heroic leaders of American business or whatever it may be. And I realized, I know then, I mean, 40 years ago, I was a young kid then, that this wasn't true. That leadership is really how you function as a person in the role.
Right.
And over the years, I came to recognize something, and it originally was the language I'm going to use right now is not what I saw at DPNL, but I saw this idea. I saw this image before me, and it's there's a persistent residual culture of values
Right.
that persist because it resides in the relationships of the people. And if you go walk around in a business, and it could be just a pharmacy, a convenience store, or any kind of business, and you talk to people, you're gonna get that picture. You're gonna realize that they're operating upon by a set of values that the company has never endorsed, but the people have, and that's the way they have learned to function so that it is in the best interest of the company and the best interest of themselves.
Right. No, I agree. And in a vacuum, employees will create their own values,
That's right.
and many times those are the values that become maybe most important. Some of them are just trying to survive, to tell you the truth. But it just again, it's a relationship. Just a quick aside, but this was a reinforcement to me about relationships. After I retired, I got a note from one of the janitors in our building, and through LinkedIn, I'm like, wow, what is that person doing on LinkedIn? Not to be assuming anything, but I thought that was just an interesting forum for this. And he said, I just wanted to write you a note because I wanted to thank you for whenever you saw me, you knew my name, you acknowledged me, you asked me how my day was going. And we'd have occasional quick conversations, but you saw me as a person, not just someone sweeping the hallway or vacuuming the rugs. To me, that was so important, and because that's how you want to treat everyone, because it's through those relationships that people will then go the extra mile
Mhm.
because they believe that you truly care about them and that you're looking out for their best interest. And many executives become so detached from the people and having those types of connections. And that's when companies, I think, can go the wrong way. And I think that's what happened with these three executives that took DP&L in a direction other than being this incredible Midwestern utility company, because they just detached themselves from employees. I mean, not allowing union people to come into headquarters. What kind of attitude is that? So it just,
Well, it's fear.
those are the reinforcements that stuck with me.
There's some fear there, fear
Yeah.
that they will see us as we truly are, and they
Well,
don't.
the emperor has no clothes.
That's right. The emperor has no clothes, and that's what I love about what I do is that I get to talk to all those people, all
Hmm.
of them, from top to
Right.
bottom,
Right.
and really they are all at one level the same. They all want to be respected.
Right. Right. And
They
seen.
don't all know how to give respect,
Right.
but
Right.
they want to be respected. They want to be acknowledged. They want,
Mhm.
they want those things that we all want.
Right. Right. No, I agree. I think at the very basic human element, people are people. They're just not cogs in the wheel.
So let's shift the context of this
Hmm.
relationship thing to grandchildren.
Yeah.
So so how are you translating these same sort of things that you mastered as an executive in the various places you worked? How are you do carry that into how you have built are building relationships with your grandchildren?
Well, they've given me the title of Cuckoo Papa. And
I like that. That's really
yeah,
good.
I think it, all self-imposed, obviously, but part of it is just, being, having fun with them and, just being approachable and being goofy. I mean, little kids don't want serious grandparents. I grew up with, I only had one grandfather, but he was, one to be respected and, to speak to only when spoken to. And, no, what I love about being a grandparent and what I love about my grandkids is just to go crazy with them and do fun stuff. And, here's the other thing that, to take them, especially the ones who are local, because I've got four grandsons who live with mom and dad in London, England, so I don't get to see them as often. But when I see them or the local ones or my other one and number two coming in Florida, is to go on a date with them on an individual, date, because that's where you really get to know them in a different way than in the crowd or with mom and dad. And two, they get to know you. They want to get to know you. And so my granddaughter, who was here, she lives down the road from us, said the other day, Papa, when can we go out on another date? I can't wait to go out on another date with you. So to me, those, again, it's all about relationships, and it's no different, in the context of what we were talking about, with grandkids. It's how do you develop the relationship with them so they know you and you know them.
That's perfect. Yeah, I totally agree. And my grandson lives in Pennsylvania, so I don't get to see him enough. But when we talk on Facebook, FaceTime,
Mhm.
and he looks at me and he goes, "Papa," and then he runs
Yeah,
away and
I
he's going
know.
crazy, and it's
Technology is great. I mean, the four boys that are in London, we know them maybe not as good as, if they were here, because I can't hug them, but they know us. We know them. We
yeah,
talk almost every day. And so technology really helps to, make the world, very small.
yeah, it's great.
But it's as I said, it's the best title that I've ever had, as Papa. So, or Cuckoo Papa, as they would say.
Well, Dan, I appreciate you very much.
Yeah.
I thank you for the opportunity to work with you. It was a life-changing experience.
Mhm.
It set the course for the rest of my career. And I don't think I've ever said that to you, but I have a deep appreciation for the collaboration that we got to do
Absolutely.
2 decades
Well,
ago.
and to your credit, Ed, I don't think the recognition that the company got, a couple of years after we had finished the values work, as the most trustworthy, company and the most highly efficient utility, that wouldn't have happened had we not gone through that process. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't the executives who delivered, the operational aspects of the company, or, the recognition of being trustworthy. It was the employees that, that was the work that they did or the feedback that they provided. So, it came back to that work, and, kudos to Paul Barbas, knowing that, this is something that he wanted to tackle right away.
Right.
Some executives would want to, okay, I'm going to wait for a year and really get to know the company and then we could decide what to do. But no, he knew that this was an impediment to really getting the company back to where he felt it needed to be. And he gave us free reign. I mean, he didn't participate in the work group at all, except that day when we presented the values to him, and I would touch base with him occasionally on progress, but it was never, well, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. It was really just to understand where we were going, and I appreciated that. And that was his type of leadership throughout the 5 years that he and I worked together.
Yeah, that's very true. So, well, thank you very much, and I wish you well on
Yes.
being a grandpa and
And
everything else.
yeah, number eight, granddaughter's coming next week. So prayers for healthy mom and baby.
Yes.
Thanks, Ed.
And thank you. And everyone, I hope this gives you the freedom to say, I can be different. I can lead by building relationships with people that I don't know, but who want to know me and want to build a relationship of respect and trust.
Mhm.
And you can do that. It's not difficult. It's
Right.
it
Not
just
rocket
takes the
science.
courage to do that. So I wish you
And
well, and if you have questions, just holler and we'll be glad to see if we can help you. And we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast. Bye bye.